Alright, so in this video, we are going to look at an introduction to transposing. Now, if you're not sure what transposing is, I will definitely explain that. But basically, what transposing is any song could be played in any key. Let's take, Happy Birthday, for example. I'll just play the melody. Right? Or I could play it in this key. Right? We still hear the melody of Happy Birthday, we're just moving it into a different key. Now, transposing is very important if you're ever playing for a singer because some singers prefer to play in a certain key based on the range of their voice. So let's get into how we transpose something. Now, remember, this is just an introduction, so this is going to be the very basics, and we are just going to work on a simple song for this. All right, so if you are not familiar with other scales yet, that is one of the most important things before you transpose, because if you can't know the scale, if you don't know the scale, if you don't know which scales have which sharps and which flats, it's going to be very difficult to transpose right on the spot. So let's start with just the song Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. First we'll just start with the melody, then we'll get into the chords. So I'm going to play it in the key of C right now, just so we have a starting point. So here's the melody. So it's a very simple melody, very familiar. So we have C, C, G, G, A, G, F, F, E, E, D, D, C. So that is how we play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, just in the key of C. So now, what a lot of people do when they transpose is they think that they have to figure out the notes for the next key, but that's going to make it very difficult. So if we wanted to transpose this up to the key of D, for example, right? That's one step higher. Now, if I try and just play everything one step higher, that's still going to be a little more difficult because we have to think in terms of the key of D, right? D major has two sharps, F sharp and C sharp. So whereas C major had no sharps and no flats, so it's all white notes. So if we wanted to transpose this up to the key of D major, rather than thinking, just everything's one step higher, we actually want to look at the movements that were taking place. So let's go back to our melody in the key of C. And let's just start with the first few notes, C, C, G, G. Now, it's the same note twice, right? Which this is actually, what's important to note is not just that we're playing C, but that since we're in the key of C, we're playing the one note, right? The root note of the key, right? C is the root note of the key of C major, so we're playing the root note in the melody twice. Then we're playing the fifth of the scale twice. Now that's important, right? To know that we're going up a fifth. That's going to help us because when we now move up into the key of D major, we don't need to think one step above C, one step above G. We can think the root note of the scale twice, and then up a fifth. And there we have the same melody. Twinkle, 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 twinkle. It's the same thing. So that's what we really want to look for when we're starting out is the intervals that we're playing, right? How big is our leap? Starting on a note, then going up a fifth. Right? So same thing with D, starting on D and then up a fifth. Now let's see what happens next. I'm going to keep going back to the key of C because that's our original key that we're transposing it from. So we have, so then it goes, so C, C, G, G. Now the new part is A, G. So that's up a whole step from our last note that we played and then back down to that note. So in the key of D, right? Twinkle, twinkle. And now we know we're going to B because it's a whole step up from our prior note, right? It's the sixth note of the scale, right? A is the sixth note in the scale from C, therefore B is the sixth note in the scale of D. So, right, now played in the key of D, it's the same thing. So now let's just do that last part where it goes, how I wonder what you are. So twinkle, twinkle, little star. And then it's how I wonder what you are. So it's the fourth of the scale, the third of the scale, the second of the scale, and then back to the root. So it's the root note, the fifth, the sixth, the fifth, the fourth, the third, the second, and the root. Now the reason I'm naming what position they are in the scale is because, like I said, when we move to another key, there may be sharps and flats. So if we're trying to pay attention to, just going a step down or whatever that may be, we may forget about the sharp. So now if we just think to ourselves, root, root, fifth, fifth, sixth, sixth, fifth, and then fourth, fourth, third, third, there's our F sharp, second, second, first. And there it is now in the key of D major. So when you're transposing melodies, try and think of the number in the scale rather than the note. Like I said, if you think root, root, fifth, fifth, sixth, sixth, fifth, fourth, fourth, third, third, second, second, root, now I can transpose that to any key. So let's just go up to the key of E major, which has 4 sharps, right? There's our 4 sharps. So if we think root, root, fifth, fifth, sixth, sixth, fifth, fourth, fourth, third, third, second, second, root. See, by knowing what position we are in the scale, it's going to help make sure that I don't forget which sharps and which flats to play. All right, so that's how it goes with transposing melodies. Obviously, as you get into more complex melodies, it's not going to be as simple, right? This is a simple melody that just uses a few notes and it stays within the scale. Transposing gets difficult when pieces use sharps and flats that are not part of the scale, but we're not going to get into that in this video. All right, so now let's go into the chords for this song, right? So the chords, there's going to be a C chord, an F chord, a C chord, an F chord, a C chord, a G chord, a C chord, like this. So now, once again, rather than thinking C chord, F chord, C chord, I'm just going to think 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. Now, if you don't know what I mean by 1 chord, 4 chord, and 5 chord, please watch my other video where I explain how chord progressions work and how we name the chords in a scale. So once again, right, in the key of C, 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. And notice I am using inversions here. I'm not playing the root position, I'm playing inversions. So now let's transpose that to D, right? So now I know my 1 chord is D, 4 chord is now G, 1 chord D, 4 chord G, 1 chord D, 5, 7 chord is my A7 chord, and then back to my 1 chord. So right there, I was able to transpose it. I could do the same thing in the key of E. Little hesitation there getting to that chord, but I remembered, right, the 4 sharps. So that is the easiest way to transpose. And when you are transposing, I want you to start with easier songs. Start with Happy Birthday, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Mary Had a Little Lamb. Start with the simple things first. If you try and get into the complex things, it's just going to be too frustrating. So start with very simple melodies, start with very simple chords, and start thinking in terms of number in the scale, right? Root, root, fifth, fifth, sixth, sixth, fifth, right? It's easier to think than up a step from C is D, up a step from G is A, and so on. It's going to be too difficult to get your mind to think of that. If you could just think in terms of numbers in the scale, and you're very familiar with the scales, you'll have no problem transposing. Same thing with the chords. We don't want to think, C chord, root position, F chord, second inversion. It's too much to think about when you're trying to transpose on the spot. We just want to think 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord, or whatever other chords may be in the scale. All right, so that is this video on just an introduction to transposing. Transposing written music is different. When we're reading music, it's kind of the same approach, but it's a little more difficult because you're trying to see the notes elsewhere. But, you do just want to always think of the scale that you're in. So if you're reading a piece of music and it's written in the key of C, but you want to play it in the key of D, you should still be thinking to yourself, it's the same melody, but if you know the notes of your new scale, you just apply it to that. If you were playing the root of the scale, now you're just playing the root of your new scale, and so on. But, reading music, you'll get into that after you can do some simple things like this. All right, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and comment if you have any questions and you want other topics covered. I'm happy to cover them. If you ever have questions, just email me at digitalpianoschool@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.